The more we learn about January 6th, the more it becomes clear that we weren't told the full story. A shocking new report exposes how Nancy Pelosi's political fixer, Aaron Black, was working behind the scenes that day at the Capitol. Now, this is the same Aaron Black who was previously caught orchestrating political chaos for the Democrats. Now we're learning that he was embedded at the Capitol on J6 and raising serious questions about what really happened that day and who was involved behind the scenes. Investigative journalists Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman have been relentless about exposing the truth about January 6th, and Steve is here to break it all down. So what's the latest that you and Joe Hanneman have found this time?
This is a very interesting story in that we have never had a name to put to the events of January 6th in the way that we want to. Now, everybody has an idea. For years and years and years, they've been calling it the Fedsurrection, or they blame the Capitol Police, or they blame Nancy Pelosi, or they blame somebody else. There's always these theoretical names, but there's never been an actual connection to somebody in that world, those circles, or those offices. And what we have now is we have a name to start with. It's not the only name we know, because this is going to be a series that Joe and I are working on. So there are other names in this series coming up. But the first one we wanted to show to the American public was Aaron Black, a.k.a. Aaron Minter, which is his real name. Nobody knows why he uses the name Aaron Black or why he switched to that, but that's been predominantly his main name since the Occupy Wall Street days, where he was a principal organizer of Occupy Wall Street. And then he kind of goes and falls off the radar for a little while, and he shows back up in 2016, caught in a Project Veritas video sting, actually admitting to starting the violence at a Trump rally in Chicago. So bad that they actually had to cancel the rally. Not only did he have the violence outside, he had over 100 of his operatives on the inside causing disruptions. And so then we lose track of him for a little while again, and he pops back up with the title on his social media as Senior Political Advisor at Team Pelosi. And then we had to fill in the blanks. So that's what Joe and I have been working on for quite a while now.
I mean, this is unbelievable stuff, and it really it represents in one way a beginning and sort of an end in my mind, because it's the culmination of years of work on your part and Joe's part looking at January 6th. Say a little bit about what led you to this story.
This story came about because after the work that Joe and I did, well, actually it was within less than an hour after the assassination attempt on July 13th last year, President Trump in Butler, PA. I get a message from you. You said you and Joe are on the story. Okay, so we drop everything and we threw ourselves into that. One of the things that we concluded through the sourcing that we had at the time, we've talked about it here on this program, is that the intelligence community sources we have, the Department of Defense special operatives that we talk to on a regular basis, they all concluded that Thomas Crooks was groomed, that this was not something he did on his own. What they said actually was, we recognize our own handiwork, which is kind of scary. So after we did this series of stories,
it's terrifying, really.
Well, because these are our guys saying we recognize our handiwork, because this is what they do overseas. They could develop anywhere from 8 to 10 young men at a time in case they needed to activate them as a human bomb, as a shooter, for whatever they needed. And so all of a sudden, a few weeks later, I get a message from somebody from the intelligence community who I did not know, but he had an interesting connection to Glenn Beck going back about 17 years to a story that Glenn Beck did back then. And as a result of that, he's been a fan of Glenn's, and then he's been a fan and a reader of Blaze Media, so Blaze News. So he was reading our stories, Joe's and my stories on this assassination attempt, and he concurred. He said, I just wanted to congratulate you guys because, like your sources, I recognize my own handiwork in Thomas Crooks. So he and I began talking, had the opportunity to kind of vet him out. And then we became very friendly in our conversations back and forth about politics and other things going on in the world. And then one day he finally said, if you really want to know what happened on January 6th, you need to look at a couple of names. He said, look at Aaron Black. I didn't know who Aaron Black was. America didn't know who Aaron Black was. I'm assuming James O'Keefe knew it because he caught him in a sting back 8 years ago or so, but the world doesn't know or didn't know who he was. And then he gave me a couple of other names that we needed to be looking at as well. And so I casually just started the process of looking him up, saw the connection to Occupy Wall Street, began to realize that this guy is a lifelong agitator, street organizer.
Yeah, well, and I listened to you say this, and Thomas Crooks, he has a very small digital footprint, right? Mm-hmm. Aaron Black, I know that's part of the story where you guys were trying to figure this out because you guys, it's not like you just did a Google search and were like, oh, Aaron Black, here he is. No, you had to go into the dark web parts and re-piece together certain aspects of this. So at that point, right? It's not like the three of us are sitting here. You can figure out information about us if you really wanted to, right? We aren't on the deep dark web side of the internet where you have to piece all of this together.
Yeah, anybody wants to know anything about me, just go to my Facebook page. It's all there. Kids, family, the whole thing. My background. I've lived my life very transparently on Facebook, but not this guy. And he's done his best to keep everything off of the web that he can. Now, he's not been successful at keeping videos he doesn't own off, like, for instance, the Project Veritas videos, but everything else he's been pretty successful at doing. And so it was tough. So we had to develop sources, people who know him, people who have worked with him, and that is where the story really develops.
So let's talk about what this sort of character does. I mean, the reason this is a story is because this is someone who is an operative. This is someone, right, who goes in and creates, agitates, creates violent situations or unpleasant situations that are public and involve demonstration. Like, he has a history of doing this both at Trump rallies and with Occupy. Okay. But let's talk about the dark arts in this situation of what these kinds of people may have been doing on January 6th.
Well, this is what one of our sources said about him, is that Aaron Black is a master of the dark political arts, and he's a master of diversion. He's a master of misdirection, these types of things, like a magician, and turning things to look one way as though they were. Because one of the things that we did capture him in, we found an article of him actually speaking to a high school group of wannabe political activists, and he was talking to them about how important it was to learn how to control the narrative. And you remember Nancy Pelosi's famous quote was about January 6th and the formation of that committee that she put together, is that the reason why they were doing that was because they needed to establish and then preserve the narrative of that day. And this is what he apparently is a master at. We can give countless examples. I don't know how much time we have to do that. But for instance, in 2016, he actually did a radio show and an interview with Breitbart. Okay, it's one of our, now this Black is a, he's a comrade. He's a he's a linen wearing, kind of cap guy. This is not a guy that's friendly to the right side of the political spectrum in this country. Yet, nevertheless, he did a story and an interview with Breitbart promoting the Trump candidacy in 2016. Now, why would he do that? It's because the Hillary campaign, who he was working with undercover and behind the scenes with through an organization called Democracy Partners, they had determined that their biggest threats in the general election was either Cruz or Rubio. So he was promoting Trump.
Right. Nobody thought that Donald Trump had a chance at that point in time. So what was Aaron Black? Let's go back to January 6th. What was he doing there that day? What do we know about his movements?
We know that he is a boots on the ground kind of guy, but he doesn't like to be seen. So what we have from our sourcing is that he had lied to somebody with whom he had a 15-year relationship. This person is mentioned in our story, Dustin Stockton, and that because of what he told him originally, that he was out of town. This is what Aaron told Stockton, was that he was out of town, and then suddenly Dustin Stockton saw a photo of Aaron Black on the Capitol steps that day, confronted him on it. He finally admitted that he had lied to him, and that's where the title of our article comes from, is this was an unforgivable breaking of trust that he had with him.
And the fact is that Aaron Black also was talking to Stockton, who worked for a right-leaning group, and people from that group were concerned about the phone calls that Stockton was furtively, apparently, privately, secretly having with Black.
Not only was Aaron Black able to successfully cross the line over to the right from his predominantly left position, apparently Dustin Stockton has the same master of the dark political arts ability to cross the line over to the left as well. Now, in his depositions with the January 6th Select Committee, in his actual testimony under oath, he talks about how he would go undercover with those organizations, but we might be learning that he just happened to work for whoever paid the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so these are people, in other words, who have worked for both sides, right, in these activist situations, and they are about shaping narratives. So the question is, like, who's paying for whom? Now, it looks like, in this case, Black is being paid for by Pelosi, right, in some fashion, or at least that's the assumption. When you see the picture, which you have to see, you have to go to the Blaze and look at this if you haven't already. The picture is priceless. It's straight out of The Godfather, where Nancy Pelosi just has her hand on his cheek. It's like she's talking to Fredo right there. But so when you see this going on now, so the idea would be that these people are pretending to be on whatever side is necessary in order to shape a narrative that will be public, and they are being paid. In the past, the examples we have anyway are through these kind of shadowy NGOs.
Right, and that's who they are getting paid with.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, we as taxpayers are ultimately financing the protest against our own candidates.
Right.
I mean, let's just call it what it is.
The NGOs, it's always going to come back to them every single time. That's what we're learning with every story that's coming up right now. But you did say this is part of a series. So how much further is this going to go? I know you can't go into all of it, but just, there's still a lot of stuff that's going to be coming out in the next few weeks.
Right.
Months.
I mean, we have only presented, when I say we, Joe and I have only presented a fraction of what we already have available, but yet every single day it continues to mushroom on us. I mean, just after the 5 a.m. publication of this story this morning, my DMs are filling up with people who know the principal characters and want to talk.
That's why we do what we do, and
Makes it fun.
This is what makes it a good time, and this is just the beginning. So, if any of you know anything about Aaron Black, Stockton, or any of these people, get in touch with Steve Baker. Get in touch with us because we are not done. No. Steve and Joe are not done, and this is just the beginning of pulling on this thread.
Steve, I have to imagine people in D.C. are getting a little bit nervous now. That you're getting closer, right? You have names now, like you said at the very top of this segment. You're finally naming names,
yeah. And we know names that are going to make people uncomfortable. Names that are going to make people, even in let's just say our side of the political spectrum, it's going to make them uncomfortable. People that are maybe not as closely attuned as you and we are, but we're probably going to be okay with it when we get there.
I think we're going to be just fine with it. You know what? We can't wait, though, to see all of that come out. And the work that you and Joe have been doing on this is tremendous. And I just remember when we had you back here on the show on January 6th, and you were walking through the Capitol building, and everybody was like, oh, man, we really appreciate what you have been doing, all of the work that you've been putting in. So to see this kind of come full circle is a really cool moment.
Thank you.
Absolutely incredible. I hope Congress appreciates it. I hope everyone in Congress appreciates it because we need to see some action coming out of this.